Socialists will often say that the Scandinavian countries, including Sweden, are what socialism looks like in action, rather than failed experiments in places like Venezuela, the USSR or the Eastern Bloc countries. But that's not quite an accurate story. The Mirage of Swedish Socialism, a new paper by our partners at the Fraser Institute in Canada as part of their Realities of Socialism project, demonstrates why. First, let's look at the history. Between 1840 and 1870, Sweden rapidly liberalised its economy, and it unleashed enormous growth. In 1950, Sweden had the fourth biggest economy in the world per capita, and it's no coincidence that it was also one of the freest, with government spending much lower than most European countries at just 20%, and its tax burden even lower than that of the United States. It was that solid pro-market foundation that the socialist policies of the Swedish government in the 70s and 80s was based on. But guess what? Those policies didn't really work anyway. Throughout this period, Sweden ran high budget deficits and became stuck in a spiral of inflation, currency devaluation and debt. Iconic Swedish businesses like IKEA even left the country because the conditions for entrepreneurship and exchange were so poor. At one point in the early 1990s, with Sweden deep in financial crisis, the central bank even set interest rates to 500%. The establishment knew something had to change and set in motion the process of returning Sweden's economy to the market-oriented system that served it so well before the 1970s. They deregulated the economy, reduced taxes, shrank government and instituted strict fiscal rules that stopped debt reaching unsustainable levels ever again. The pension system was reformed to give private savings a bigger role. The government's owned industries were privatised and taxes on wealth, gifts and inheritance were abolished. Sure, Sweden does still have a rather large and generous welfare state, but that doesn't tell the full story either. The failed policies of the 1970s taught Sweden that it can't just tax the rich, i.e. it can't just rely on a small group of taxpayers to fund welfare. It needed a larger tax base. Funding that welfare state means taking more taxes from middle and low income families. It has a 25% VAT, efficient for raising revenue, but a massive burden on families' budgets. Sweden's tax system is in fact one of the least progressive in the Western world. The country is also pioneer in giving people the choice for services they receive, even if the state does pay significantly towards them. Sweden gives citizens freedom to choose who provides their pensions, social care, childcare and schooling, creating competitive markets and not state monopolies. This is part of the reason why Sweden's economy is one of the freest in the world, being more market-oriented than even the United States, according to data from the Economic Freedom of the World. So next time you hear voices on the left calling for more state intervention in the economy or higher taxes on the rich, don't let them get away with saying that Sweden does the same. Sweden experimented with that approach in the 70s and 80s, and it failed. Sweden has one of the freest market economies in the world, generating the prosperity to fund its generous welfare state. But let's be clear, Swedes across the income scale pay a high price for even just that policy choice.